I saw how fractured our industry had become. I see as the biggest challenge is what we did to our customers.
We have brackets on the statement, like we're truly losing money after operating capital's done.
Now we've created a financial nightmare.
Don't get hung up on what you think you know, right? Like we have this construct of like, nope, this is the right way.
90% of the dealers out there do a shit job.
I personally think that dealers are wrong. Yep, I'm saying it to everybody, and I'm saying it to NADA as well. I think the way that you train a statement is fundamentally broken.
What they're not doing anything to engage the customer, to retain the customer.
But you have to invest in your people so that they can embrace this, because it only empowers the dealership to do better and be more agile.
When I started in 1982 to today, the actual percentage of commission never changed. It never changed. So therefore,
are you wasting your time and money on inefficiencies in the business? Are sales down and lead conversion rates are low? Are you having problems building or maintaining inventory levels? What does it really take to win in the automotive industry?
Get the cars that make sense for your store rather than just wishing at an auction. So it gives you that better control.
With over 25 years of experience, Darrell the Wolf Steed isn't just another industry voice. He's the guy who's out there solving real problems for dealers just like you.
They'll even say in the Pacific Northwest where you're at that it's a tougher market. It's, it's tougher to find cars. The market's a little bit softer. And in the midst of all this, your turn doubled and your profit's up 75%.
Yes.
The truth hurts only when it should. Are you ready to hear the truths? Darrell is here to unpack the hard truths and the proven strategies that will take your dealership from struggling to soaring. And he is taking it all in the streets, with real talk, open dialogue, unfiltered conversations. This is the podcast series, Street Smarts, powered by Smartwolf Consulting.
Hello, everybody. My name is Darrell Steed, your host here of Street Smarts, and today we get to be joined by somebody who has years of experience, decades of experience in the auto industry, from selling, running stores, and now consulting and coming up with new solutions. I'm very excited because our guest has a knack for getting rid of the nonsense and what we might say the bullshit and getting right to the center of it. And not to mention creating dynamic ways to create conversation and really attack the problem head on. No further ado, let's welcome Peter Smith. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking about some really interesting things today.
hey, Darrell, that's, you know what, it's such a pleasure to come on your show and really talk about what is necessary out there in the industry. We are really lacking in a number of dynamics that have to be changed. So I'm so excited to talk about that today.
Well, let's jump right into it. I always like to start, with all the things that we obviously work for, or what we do. And it'd be great for everyone to hear, where are you winning, or what is going really well in life, and kind of why you do what you do.
Well, that's a great question. 42 years of being in this business, I've basically accomplished so many different things, but I got into it 2 years ago because of a small fender bender my wife was in. I returned after retirement, I should say, and because I saw how fractured our industry had become from COVID, and how, as they talk about it, COVID babies and everything else that are in the industry, and it's buy here, do this, do that, or else basically piss off and we'll move to the next person. I knew right then that the industry was absolutely in trouble and we had to change it. And if we didn't change it, it was just going to just chew up and spit out hundreds, if not thousands of people. And that's why I got back into it. Since then, I've created a number of relationships with some great people out there, including yourself, and seeing where the direction the industry has to go to actually survive. And if it doesn't go in those directions, it's going to be dead in the water, because we're in, I would like to say, the giant swirling of the toilet bowl right now.
Sure, I 100% agree. It's funny you say that, like, because there's a lot of conversations of the goods and bads of COVID, which I'm sure we'll hit a couple of different times, because it definitely shifted the marketplace, both in how we sell cars, what we expect from our people, and then just the dynamic after. What I think is interesting is I just saw a little clip of Brian Binstock. For those of you guys that don't know, Brian runs Paragon Honda, has for 20 plus years. And he was actually talking about something completely unrelated of the auto industry, but it kind of ties into this, which is the real estate industry. And we're not talking houses, but we're talking commercial real estate is like in its dire straits, or it is drastically suffering right now. And it's because of that. And what I thought was interesting was, everybody's working from home, and so they don't need these big buildings and people don't come together. And when I saw that, I thought this would be a great topic, because it really ties into what the industry turned into with disconnection, was when people work together, or they come together. Not saying working from home is some absolutely terrible idea, but when you're working from home, you also are isolated in a sense. Yes, you can do some webinars, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on when people come together and create that dynamic climate of energy, how it actually feeds, getting better in the challenge, and obviously creating that different construct.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we can also go back to one of the most brilliant minds in this industry, Elon Musk. He mandated that everyone return back to work from the hybrid role that was being offered, because he believes, and rightfully so, that collaboration of mindsets, when you are actually in the same room together, not on a Zoom call, not on a Teams meeting or anything like that, but actually in a room together, you can get so far ahead. It's amazing, because basically, if you're at home and you're doing a hybrid role, when are you going to bring up that interesting item that is going to spark that, how would you say, intuitiveness of all the people out there that say, hey, okay, how are we going to get this ripple effect? And we talk about the ripple effect a lot in the automotive, like one sale equals 500 different items that are going to happen down the road. Just from that one sale. How does the revenue come from the dealership into the small micro businesses around it because of that profitability? So it's the same with people actually creating value to a business. If you have that one person to engage in an idea, then you are going to magnify that out in the ripple effect, the circle of influence, everything else. So yeah, I agree with that 100%. Now on the second side of that, the commercial building issue, that we are now creating all these hollow buildings because of way COVID actually brought us all together or took us all apart, is a big challenge, because that is actually fueling the economy. And we got to go back to bringing that money back into the industry out there. Otherwise, we're just going to continue that spiraling effect downward.
Yeah. And I think that's, it's just an interesting dynamic, because, yes, global pandemic, we'll say hopefully we never see that again, but it was it is a once in a lifetime type of thing. Is in the automotive industry, you saw the same thing as prices obviously being elevated, overpriced, whatever it may be. And then you lost that, and for a lack of a better term, we'll call it salesmanship, but I like to call it connection or experience, due to the fact that the supply and demand was like nothing we'd ever seen before. I mean, this was probably one of the silliest things I've ever seen. And which has, as you said, the ripple effects after have been, I don't want to say catastrophic, but have been industry changing. Is what do you see the biggest challenge right now with the automotive industry that they get? And when I say that the biggest challenge, because there's quite a few of them that are big ones. But the biggest one that we have the most control over to actually track and adjust and get back to where we were or back on track quickly.
So the first one that's out there that I see as the biggest challenge is what we did to our customers. And when I say what did we do, is the madness of the COVID inventory challenge, where we started charging $10,000 over for a Toyota Corolla, and you're talking like 50% upcharges and addendums to cars that nowhere near deserve those upcharges. Now you have someone who's paying 1.5 times monthly on a car that they can't get out of, that they can't retail out of, they're just stuck in that car for the 6, 7, 8 year finance that we put them into. And now we're seeing a lack of 1 to 5 year old cars in the marketplace because of that. And now that's creating another ripple effect, that the finance, that people can't afford those finance terms. And now I think the latest number is 56% of people are in subprime. Now we've created a financial nightmare. And what are we going to do about that? Well, it's going to have to come down to, and it used to be that the dealers had to guarantee the loans for people. And it's going to go back to that. I remember in the late 90s that dealers had to put recourse on all the loans to get the inventory through, because at 56%, that financial tornado that we're entering into is just going to get worse and worse and worse. I think the number was something like 38% were 3 months behind on their lease obligation or their financial obligations on cars right now.
Sure. I mean, it's definitely higher than ever before. And what's oddly interesting is I believe it was, I don't know, mid 600s before COVID, and 1819 was the average payment across America, which at that time I was like, wow, that's a pretty big average payment when you think about when you have factor in leasing and retail. And now the average payment is just short of $1,000, which I was just in a showroom the other day, and I kind of was just blown away because, I mean, I have no problem saying that I'm like cheap in the sense of like for a car payment, because I've been in the industry. So I will drive a bucket and have no problem with it. A car is a car to me. But I'm sitting there watching some deals being made, and it was like deal after deal, $1,190, $1,270, $1,450. And I'm thinking to myself, what are these jobs like? Where do these people work that they can afford $1,400 a month? And then taking a closer look, these are people that are making $70,000, $80,000 a year. So then when you do the math, you're like, how do they pay for a house? How do they pay for it? Like, it is kind of just crazy, this dynamic we've put people in, which in turn puts people into that, like, you're really pushing, because a car is something you need in today's society to get to where you're going. And I think that really drives into the experience of it, right? There was a lot of greed from dealers. And, you know, if you've ever seen the movie Wall Street or Wall Street 2, right? And greed is good, you know, and apparently it's legal now, right? Mm-hmm. And I only reference that because there's nothing wrong with greed. We see it with gas companies. I mean, I don't know how gas can be, like in California, $7 a gallon. And you're like, and they're having tough times. Like, it's insane. However, you have to, I almost wonder, is it irresponsible? Or what do we ask ourselves when it comes to the experience of, what do you think that person does? You have rolled out the red carpet. You have treated the customer like absolute gold. You've done all the things right. So we're saying you are one of the top 5% dealers in the country. Now this person can't afford anything. Like they can't afford anything. And you wonder, okay, do they really like you anymore? Because at the end of the day, they're going to associate blame or responsibility to the person that put them in that car. Even if you did everything right, it just rates, prices, whatever it may be. And so I'd love to hear what you think. And when it comes to that experience and that retention of customers, what do we do with that now that we're in this kind of weird paradox of affordability, prices being outside the scope of like even realistic, and just how we're taking care of the customer?
So, okay. So there's a lot to unpack on that one. And like that's a month-long vacation unpacking. You look at it and you say, okay, how do we understand this? And one of the things that first we have to accept responsibility as dealers. We have to accept responsibilities that we put ourselves into this because of, as you said, greed. There's various dealerships out there, JR Toothman, a bunch of others that refuse to sell at over list price because they didn't want to take advantage of people in this situation. So what happens to them? Well, the dealers that charged over the list price are going to go after their customers because they're the low-hanging fruit and they're going to get on them. So they suffer as well. So, but let's look at what's going on there. The average price of a car. I looked at a dealer this morning, and that dealer in itself, the average car on their lot was $5,000 down, and I would say the monthly payment on a 6 or 7 year finance was about $1,200 to $1,500 for a $50,000 car. And you're going, how does anyone afford it? No one can. So we have to really change the dynamic. And one of the challenges in the States is we don't know how to sell leases. And when I say we don't know how to sell leases account for 24.6%, I believe, right now in the US as a penetration rate as purchases. That is the only thing that's going to get us out of our issues. And we're going to have to take the bite on the back end. We're going to have to the manufacturers are going to have to get involved. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. And that's the only way you're going to get the cars out into the marketplace. And the best thing that the manufacturers can do on that is go short-term leases, 24 to 36 month terms, get the payments as low as possible, guarantee the back end of the lease, and that's going to take them out. Otherwise, you're going to have a challenge at the dealer, and the only way you're going to keep those dealers alive is two things. One is used car pricing. And that means acquisition, which is one of the things that your specialty at. The second thing is that you're going to have your fixed ops on the ball, and I mean really on the ball, because right now the loss in fixed ops is 70% right off the bat, and then another 70% when the warranty ends. And with the average person keeping their cars on the road for 12.6 years. You have a big challenge because that's 8 years of independent shops eating your lunch. So there's a huge opportunity for the dealerships that actually know what they're doing to go out there and capture business. If you're not ready to get in this game and use the technology that's available to you right now, then you, by all means, sell out to Lithia, sell out to AutoNation, sell out to Ashbury, all the big groups that are willing for acquisitions. Look at Morgan growing and growing and growing. They spent over, I think, $1 billion last year acquiring dealerships. So you're going to be the acquired, not the acquiree.
Yeah, I think that's interesting when you say that, because you brought up one thing which I think is really important, right? Because as we take it to the streets, right, and we're talking about real problems, real solutions, or just real concerns, is, with new cars, if we don't lease, yes, obviously I specialize in used car acquisition, building that strategy, then being that. However, that is one of those things that right, and we say if because we have the control to do this, but it's whether or not that's embraced, is if we don't lease more cars and then build that inventory back in, used car compression and acquisition, not only will it be here forever, but it will be equally as hard for 10 years to come, because again, you don't have as much inventory as being resold because of the price of new cars. But what I thought you said that was probably one of the more interesting points that no one's brought up in the podcast we've done so far is the service acquisition, or the service model is, the independent shops, and how service, you've kind of just let it come to you. Right, you just let it come to you and you handle your customers, and maybe you're good at it, maybe you're not, who knows, right? Everyone's a little different. But and I only bring it up again because they were the first ones I ever saw do it. But Paragon, right out in New Jersey, they created a model, and at this point had to be 10 years ago, and they were definitely pioneers trying this because this was all risk with no forecast or reward. It was, let's see if we can be done. But going and getting cars and going and doing that. And they basically said our new business model, sales, generates our service model, which is now our profit model. And they go and they service these cars and they go get them 20, 30, 40, 50 miles away, provide them a rental or a car for the day, bring it back to them, because they understood as compression happened and as things started changing, their fixed operations was going to be basically the construct of how they stayed in business. And then sales was just basically feeding that business model, which was kind of opposite of what most stores is like. They wanted more sales because fixed stops would kind of pay for the store or portions of it, but sales was like the profit matrix. And I've started seeing like a shift of the good store saying, you know what, like sales, if we made enough money to pay the store, whatever it is, service will be our profit model because they can do more of it. They can then take that industry back. They can take from the independents. And so I think that's something where dealers haven't really looked, or they haven't focused on, so to say, that they have a real chance of obviously not just changing the industry, but like no longer being dependent on this old construct of we have to operate in this different funnel. We can actually do it a different way. So I think it's interesting you brought that up. With used cars, when we talk about new and the, how that is like being that is where a lot of dealers are focusing. And when I did the intro to this podcast, I talk about how I've been building and buying centers for 14 years now. And it's just now the buzzword of like, oh, everyone needs to do this, which, hey, good for me. Obviously it gives me a leg to stand on because I was just doing it kind of in the shadows. However, when it comes to used cars, what are you seeing like where dealers are struggling, or what are they doing well in dealers you see? And like, where do they need to refocus, or where do they need to focus? Obviously, with the ever-changing market.
So that's all. That one almost makes me chuckle. It does make me laugh actually, because I will say 90% of the dealers out there do a shit job at that, and I will use that term, shit, because that's what it's all about right now. They are stepping in it. They don't understand acquisition. How many times do you see, oh, just go get a price from CarMax? Just that, go to Kelly Blue Book, go to here. What, they're not doing anything to engage the customer, to retain the customer. And that is the biggest challenge out there. And you and I met at Used Car Palooza in Chicago, and that was one of the most dynamic events that I've been to this year, and I can't wait to hear you speak on Wednesday. But it's the acquisition model. That's where we're really failing. We're really failing at acquisition. We're failing at engaging the customer to find out where their trades are, what is happening. Obviously, when a person gets a car, there's only one reason why there isn't a trade, and it's because the car was written off before it. That's only reason why there isn't a trade. Sure. That car, the car that they're replacing, regardless of where it's going, there is something out there, and we're not capturing it. And that's where the money is to be made. If we look at the how would you say, the mistake that most people are doing, they're going to auctions and they're spending their profit by going to auctions, and they don't realize it, because if you roll up a dealer's sleeve and look at the tattoo on the arm, this is the way we've always done it. And that's the biggest challenge. We have to break that mold and go back to the foundation of the business and rebuild it. And that's the challenge that we're facing. I can say it over and over and over again. There's so many things that we do right now in the business that are negatively affecting the operational profitability of the business.
No, I 100% agree. And, you know, a lot of people are like, well, Joe, you don't think we should use the auctions? No, I think the auctions serve a place. I just think it's 5%
Oh,
of our strategy rather than 75%. And when I got the stats, you know, let's see, it was, you know, in October where it's Mannheim saying that the average cost or the average sale is 92 to 97% of cost to market. I mean, I don't know. I was pretty good at math, but I know sometimes things change. 92 to 97, and then you have transport, and then a safety, and then profit. I don't quite understand, unless you're selling all your cars at 125 to 130%, how you're making money on them. But maybe there's somebody out there that's found that secret sauce, and if they have, don't give it to anyone. Keep that secret because you found it. But when we look at that is when we have acquisition, whether it be service drive, private party acquisition, trade-ins, right? And trade-ins are the one that they control the most. Because with trade-ins, that's your one, you have experience, two, you have connection with the customer, and three, I think it's just a miscommunication, I would say, all over the place of when they do this, well, some people say it nice and say hold on trades. And then we have the old school methodologies, which I'm ripping trades, right? I'm going to make UA or under allowance. And I always ask this question every training cycle I'm on, every speech is, how many of you guys buy cars at the auction? And, you know, 90% of them raise their hand. And then I'll say, okay, well, I'm just curious, why wouldn't you pay the same money for the car in your store? Well, that's where the profit lies. Okay, well, if the customer leaves, we know where that car is going for most part. It's going to one of two major consideries of CarMax or Carvana because they buy an absorbent amount of cars that then get sold back to the dealers for more money, which that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are just on when it comes to trades or service driver acquisition, where you think dealers are not doing it, because we know they're not. I mean, buying centers 14 years later has just now become a trigger word to where people are wanting to do it. So that just tells you how long it takes for the automotive industry to grab onto something. But where do you think the fear, like what fear driver is keeping dealers away from taking back? Because it's really in essence giving them control. So why are so many dealers afraid of getting into that construct of acquisition?
Well, the first thing is they've never done it. So there's always a fear of the unknown. So when you, like, for example, I presented a opportunity to a dealer group that would save them $500,000 a year in credit card costs. And because they didn't know about it, they didn't want to do it. And I say, so you don't want to do it because you don't know about it. Okay, well, that makes a whole lot of sense. It's that innate fear because they have this thing in their psyche that if they don't know about it or they didn't discover it, then it doesn't exist. And that's one of the things I think of technology. And you look at technology out there and the availability of technology. And we'll talk about the auctions and things like that. I'm going to use it. There's a company out there that most of us know about it, and most of us look at it and say, "Oh man, that's stupidly expensive." UVI. Now, UVI, if you set that up in your service drive, it's about $8,000 a month to put it in each bay of your service drive. Now, think about how many ROs you do a month and how many cars are going through it, because there's more cars going through it than ROs because we're not capturing every single RO. Now, you have a complete video and picture perfect right down to the smallest degree on damages on every car that's visited your dealership. Take a dealership like Smart Toyota in Madison, Wisconsin. They do 9,000 ROs. They'll probably run 13,000 cars through their service drive a month. 13,000. You're looking at about 150,000 cars that go through their drive a year, with all the imaging, all the data capture. Now think about that for acquisition. You never have to hit a dealer auction ever again. You have that but again, dealers aren't thinking outside of the boxes. They're looking at what they know, and they don't want to grow. They're right now, and I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, dealers are experiencing root rot because they haven't taken the plants out of the pots, and they're just expecting growth because they're doing what they've always done, and that's the biggest challenge. We got to get the technology to the dealers and get them to buy into it. But because most dealers have grown up without technology, and because I'm saying most dealers are in an age group that grew up without technology, are not embracing it. And that's the biggest challenge I see.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, like, okay, we're a fear of the unknown, which, I mean, that's pretty much everything in life for a better part of society. I wouldn't say that that's a crazy jump of fear. What I think is interesting, so we're a fear of the unknown, but we're a fear of failure. Like, we all know people have a fear of failure. They don't want to fail, right? Because it's whether they're embarrassed, their ego can't handle it, they can't afford it, whatever it may be. What I think is interesting in the fear of unknown is, but we will keep the same dynamic or the same construct in place. As you know, some people have said, like SpeedX says, like, you go look at the data, 10 cars average for a salesperson, then 10 cars, then 10 cars, and which I find oddly funny because I actually didn't know that stat until, like, I knew it was close, but that it keeps staying the same. But we will let our store get to the point where we have brackets on the statement, like we're truly losing money after operating capital's done, before we will change anything. And then we'll even operate that way for months, if not a year, before we almost are like forced to contrition. Like, okay, now mom's making you eat your vegetables. Like, you have to do it. And I think that's interesting because when I look at it, like the way I build buying centers or acquisition strategies, you know, to use it in the real terms, is that I know this sounds crazy, and I'll probably, you know, when this episode comes out, I'll probably get comments and trolls of, I don't ever look at the profitability of it. I look at the experience and the connection and the brand of it, because if you do it consistently and you do it right. Now, I could just be the luckiest person in the world, but every one of these I've built has become extremely profitable by not focusing on the profit. But it was out of the it wasn't because I was afraid we'd fail. It was, I didn't see how you could continue just using the auctions as your only point of source, and then trade-ins, right? Even if you're really good at trade-ins, I mean, you are dialed. Well, whether you want to grow or you want to do this, is you still need a couple of sources, right? Because if trade-ins had one low month, you don't want to be like bagged. If auctions didn't have the cars, you didn't want to be bagged. So it's having a holistic strategy. So I think it's interesting that we're a fear of the unknown, but which one's worse, the fear of the unknown or the fear of staying in the same spot, or like failure? Like, because at this point, new cars aren't going out as fast as we thought. Used cars are, I won't say impossible, but they're the most expensive they've ever been, to include COVID, because COVID, we could pay up, but we were selling them way over the market. Now you're having to pay up, but the market is back down to where it was. So there's zero gap of profitability. So I'm just curious, when it comes to it, why are we not focusing on getting our customers back into that experience, whether you want to call it the white glove, or that we need them as much as they need us type of construct, so that we can control our own outcome a year from now or 2 years from now?
So on that, there's a couple things that I look at in that. First of all, because of smartphone technology, we've migrated to the instant gratification mindset. Everyone wants instant gratification. Everyone wants the instant sale, the low hanging fruit. With the dealers, with the technology that's being brought to us, we've been educated that it's all in the amount of leads we can capture. So if we capture 10,000 leads, we know that we're going to sell X amount of cars. And that's the challenge. So now the mindset goes to the dealers and says, well, if we just capture more leads, we will get more sales. And that is wrong, where we should be looking at our first party data and actually building upon that. Now, you mentioned Spizak saying the 10 cars from 1970 to today's date, which is a number that has always been. It hasn't changed. And what has changed over those times? Well, we've gone through financial revolutions with bringing out leasing. We've come to the internet. We got CRMs. We got all this technology. So what does that leave back to us is process and people. So what is the challenge there? Is it our process or is it our people? It could be a base on two of those. Now I'm going to turn around and say one other thing to that. And I've talked about stop the madness, and the stop the madness is the way we're doing things in our dealerships. One in Canada, we have an average leasing penetration of over 70%. You're at 25% in the US. So how does that transpire to how we sell cars? Well, in Canada, we have 2.5 times the franchises that you do in the United States. So we have 2.5 times the competition, but our average salesperson sells 12 cars in Canada versus 10 cars in the United States. Now, one of the things that is dynamically different from that is you cannot get a salesperson in Canada to make a phone call. It's almost impossible. Whereas in the States, you have to make 50 phone calls, 20 text messages, 20 emails, 10 videos, and set 2 appointments a day. Otherwise, your job's on the line. In Canada, that would never happen, and because you wouldn't have a workforce. They just walk out. So the challenge with that is how do we change the focus point to providing a quality connection versus a quantity connection in the States, and that's where the challenge is going to reverse itself. But getting the dinosaurs, and David and I had this conversation, is there's so many dinosaurs in this business, and one of the things that they don't realize yet, the meteor has hit the ice or hit the earth. The ice age has started. The dinosaurs are in trouble. They're facing extinction. And if they don't get off the glacier that's moving at a glacier rate in the focus of change, they're going to become extinct. So we have to as vendors and professionals, we have to help them see the light of the change. We got to get them off this is how we've always done it routine. And that is going to come through technology and how and process.
No, and I think it's true. Like, we talk technology because technology is a big thing. We have a few cute. I call them cute because I love when people grab onto something and make it like it's like super cool. But we have these cute buzzwords like EV and AI and and things like that. And I go, well, AI has been around for quite some time. They're just repackaging it, and now it's got learning models to it, and it's got some other things that they've now progressed with, but we've had AI type functions for a lot longer than people would realize.
Oh, absolutely.
EVs have been around. Like, I don't know if people know this or not, but, and not that I'm a huge fan or not a fan, but like Tesla had an EV, that little tiny ass 2-seater 20 years ago. And it was fast, and yeah, it had its problems and everything else, mostly because there was nothing to do it. Like, no one knew how to fix it. Because it was so new. But when I look at these buzzwords in technology, when we talk about the 10 cars from 70s to 80s to 90s to 2000s and so on, what I think is interesting is what's changed in the dynamics in 40 years. Well, technology. What hasn't changed, because when we talk about our process or our people, it almost inherently has to be people. I believe it's 100%. There's processes piece of that for sure. But I think it leans more on our people because, okay, we had fax machines and rotary phones. Then we had beepers, which we won't even get started on beepers because they had zero function, but damn, they were cool. And then we had cell phones, and we still had fax machines because it was like the dinosaur said, nope, I don't want to let go of this. And then when cell phones came out, then we had, black or AKA crackberries and PDAs. And then those didn't make it because of the way that they were, but phenomenal movie if you ever get to watch it on just how that went down. But so then we moved out of that. Now we got smartphones and, give it to Apple because they wanted people to use their hands, be interactive with the device, which I think has been a great technology. And then you get into the software implications. I know when I first bought the very first car that I was shown how to buy and everything else, we definitely didn't have any V autos and we didn't have any like tests like that. It was a little blue book and flipping through it and trying to add stuff. So we've had some pretty dynamic technology changes that I think has made us more efficient. And the people have been the reason why the technology can't do, won't do, or for whatever reason doesn't perform at what they intended. Because it's almost like we gatekeep these, like, we don't want to embrace it, so we'll slow it down or we'll like resist it. And what I think is interesting about that is it because we're gatekeeping or resisting it, or, which I'm more leaning towards, how does a used car manager that they put new technology in, or they want to build a buying center, or they're going to do a service drive integration, how do we make sure that that person doesn't have, which you've brought up, and I think is great to tie these together, is that fear of the unknown. How do we make sure that they're trained and they feel confident in that? I know personally, any dealership I've walked into, training is like a cuss word. And like to sit there and say they have a training regimen, if you walk in and they can print out, this is how we train, and this is what we do, and they have that, I'll be 100% honest. I would be like, man, you're the one out of a million. Like, you're a unicorn. So why is it we're so afraid to empower, whether there's investments involved? I'm not saying it's free, but you have to invest in your people so that they can embrace this, because it only empowers the dealership to do better and be more agile.
So again, I love the word resisting. They're resisting it because they don't know. And my wife says it best. It's the unconscious incompetent, is that they don't know that they don't know, therefore they don't know that they don't know. And you turn around and say, okay, well, why is that? Well, you have a general manager in a dealership that has 8 to 16 silos that they're representing and they have to look at. You have executive managers that have more than one store and they have to look at all those stores times the amount of silos. They don't have enough time in the day to actually figure it out. And it's no fault on their own that they just don't have that ability to figure it out. And because there's technology is coming out so fast. You look at NADA, there's 700 vendors. How are you going to go to NADA and see those 700 vendors? How are you going to pick what is actually working for you? You need someone else on the outside looking for you, and that's their only job to do. Now, the challenge comes next is onboarding and turnover. Forget about training right now. Just look at onboarding and turnover. Sure. If you put the people in place, how much onboarding are you giving them so that they understand the structure of what you need to be successful? They're not getting it. Onboarding is getting confused with orientation. And that, hey, we're just going to give them a desk, give them a phone, give them their passwords, and get at it. They're never going to be successful that way. They're not investing in that. The reason why they're not investing in that, it doesn't show on the statement. So therefore, it's never going to get addressed. Now, the resisting of the technology that's available is because no one wants to get out of their rut, their groove that they're in to make it better. You can't turn around and say, hey, you know what? We know this is going to change your life. We're going to absolutely change your life, because now you can just be an inventory manager. Like I represent a technology that allows the pricing to be dynamic on the lot. Do you think that dealers would be lined up to allow that to happen because they want to be first in market, as you say, to create that flow of sales? Well, right now in the current situation, they have all the paper addendums and they have everything else that they go out with. They don't want to engage in it, even though it's less expensive and gives you better features. They're having a challenge getting engaged in it. It just doesn't make any sense because they are so stuck in their ways. And that's the biggest challenge we face every single time. As you say, if you go into a dealership and they have something written out, this is our training process, you fall down. You you turn around and go, how's that happen? But let's go one step further. Training only accounts for 23% lift in performance. Adding coaching to that, and we all have coaches. Adding coaching to that, it takes it up to 88% in lift. But where's the investment?
And I think that's interesting you say that, because like when I was at Used Car Palooza and we're doing that, that was the challenge I threw down at the end. Is I just said, hey, everyone raise your hand if you have one of the people that were speaking on your staff or in your retainer, or if you have a coach, or if you have somebody. And the reason I wanted to know that was two reasons. One, it was to illustrate that point. You could have a great training regiment, which would be a unicorn in itself, because that's not something really focused on in stores. But I find it oddly interesting, and it goes back to experience, because I focus on experience, is two things. One, we'll say millennials and Generation Z now, because before it was really millennials, but now Gen Z is coming into the fold of hiring, and they're much younger. Is if you take you or I, who've been in the industry for 25 years plus, and we didn't do any coaching or any training or any development, you're going to tell me that we are the best communicators to these Gen Zs, to these late millennials, to where the way they communicate, how they grew up, what they do, we have nothing in common and have no idea. Some of the words that my kids use, I'm like, I don't even understand what you're saying. It's Ebonics. And what I find is interesting is when I had everyone raise their hand, there was two people. And I was like, so wait, we tell our people, mind you, we'd never really show them, but we tell our people, you got to get better. You got to take it by the horns. You got to get this going. Cause that's what we were told. Right. And it was baptism by fire. And we tell them, and they're like, but then they don't have any resources and everything else. Well, how do you expect your people to get better if you don't? Right. And it's more that law of the lid. If I'm a 5, how do I expect my people ever to get to a 5? I'm holding them down. But if I increase my knowledge base or my understanding or my communication skills, I'm allowing my people to grow. And so I find it interesting that everyone, as an industry, I won't say everyone, but as an industry whole, coaching is this faux pas, or having someone on staff. Because like you said, it doesn't translate into gross in the way that they measure it on a statement. So they go, oh, it's an expense. I was like, okay, well, I personally think that dealers are wrong. Yep, I'm saying it to everybody, and I'm saying it to NADA as well. I think the way that you train a statement is fundamentally broken, because that statement came out in whatever it was, the 60s, I think, maybe the early 70s, and they've trained it the same way, where you have fixed ops, finance, front end and back, or I'm sorry, new sales, used sales, finance, and fixed ops. Well, wholesale was a negative word. Well, wholesale can be a whole business operation. But where's the investment cycle? Why is everything an expense? And I experienced this firsthand with Kelley Blue Book. I was a senior trainer for them. When we first got put on as employees, we were part of the sales team. We trained it. Sometimes we'd upsell it or service to sales and things of that nature. So we were part of the sales team. And then I think it was year 2 into it, we got put over to Kelley Blue Book headquarters, and we were part of the admin or the support or whatever they called it. So now we were an expense. We are no longer revenue generating. However, if we kept people from canceling and created that experience and that connection, then we were I don't know how you sit there and say that we're not revenue generating, because if they cancel, you know what you lost? Revenue. So if someone put in a cancellation and I went in and I showed them a different way or saved it, didn't I just create revenue? Because that revenue was about to leave. And so I think it's interesting that we always look at things as expenses rather than investments. If I put an investment in, let's say, an absolutely absurd stock like Amazon that just seems to keep growing and growing. If I bought it 30 years ago, listen, I'm not working now. Obviously I didn't. But if you bought it now, you'd be like, oh my gosh, Amazon's whatever, $3,000 a share or $1,600 a share when it's split. But what is it going to be in 20 years from now, right? It's an investment. It's not an expense. I don't go, oh, Amazon's costing me so much money. No, it's an investment in the future. So I do find it interesting that we look at everything as an expense rather than an investment. It's almost like we're this very negative focus of how we look at life, rather than saying, if I invest in my people, if I invest in my future and do it wholeheartedly, get I'm not getting halfway pregnant, right? I'm jumping all the way in and getting in this thing, is that then all of a sudden you see these very unique And I only say unique because it's not normal, right? I wish it was normal. We said, oh yeah, that's just the standard. Operations like Glenn Lundy, or there was a dealership in Texas. I did a webinar with them. And if he was lying to me, and I tell people this, I'd go work for him today, just based on what he said. He says, our motto here at our dealership is our people first, our customers second, and our profits third. To me, that, like, the fact that the owner says that, if he's lying, I'm at least giving you an opportunity, because I've never heard anyone, one, say that and then actually commit to it. Then his people, I did training sessions with 4 different people. They were like, yeah, he'll have months where he's like, oh, we only made 50 grand, but our CSI is so high, or this or that. So I just wonder, why do we always focus on the expense and not the investment or the experience too? Because I think that really goes into the experience for the consumer and your staff. If you invest in them, don't they feel more empowered? Don't they want to work for you?
Absolutely. So I couldn't agree more with you there. Expense versus revenue generation is one of the biggest challenges that I have with dealers. And being from the north, there's a lot of snow out here. And one of the biggest things is, what happens when it snows? You send out your sales team to clean cars and brush the snow and do this. Well, you're telling your sales team that they should be making 6 figures. Well, you're putting a person out there at $50 an hour to clean cars because they cost you nothing, because they're commission only, and therefore you're saving on your expense, when those people should be in doing training, doing coaching, doing calls, doing this, doing that. They have so many other things that can generate revenue, and it's absolute madness. Now, as you said, the dealer in Texas that said his people first, then his customers, then his profit. And you said it earlier in the call that never look at the KPIs as a profit, because profits will come when you do the job correctly.
Sure.
You know who else said that? Ed Roberts. And he's recognized as one of the biggest leaders in the business. He doesn't look at the KPIs. He looks at keeping his people motivated and in line with what their jobs are first, and the profits will come after that. Why? Like, you look at, he's in St. Augustine, Florida. How big is that area? Yet he has an inventory of almost 3,000 cars. He is one of the largest Ford dealers in the state of Florida. He is known throughout the industry. Why? Because he does the job right, because he looks at what is necessary first. It's the review of the expense model, that just drives me crazy, because in all essences, your people are not an expense. They are an investment. The more investment you put into them, the lower your turnover is. The lower your turnover is, you take a turnover cost of a B-class technician is $132,000. A salesperson is $119,000. You're losing them at 70%. 70%. So if you look at that, you're looking at millions and millions of dollars that don't show up on the statement. And as you said, the NADA model on statements is as archaic as how we operate dealerships today. And we got to turn around and start investing in our teams, really, truly investing in our teams, looking at other avenues to create profitability, looking at, and one of the things I've always said is, create a business plan, a real business plan for every single revenue generating employee, every single one. And let's coach them to success through their business plan. How do they want to make more money? How do they want to get that raise? Because I know from when I started in 1982 to today, the actual percentage of commission never changed. It never changed. So therefore, in 42 years, I never got a raise. 42 years. The only way I got a raise is to improve what I did or increase the gross profit of what I did. And that was the only way we got raises. So how do we define that to the people that are looking at career paths in this industry? We have to help them. We have to coach them. We have to provide them with a real business plan, something that is tangible and moves them forward. There's technology out there, and one of the greatest ones I've ever seen in my career is onboarding. Onboarding is absolutely incredible, and I think it should be in every single dealership because of the technology it uses, and it shows them the growth individually on your own application, and it communicates so well to drive that growth and keep the people in the dealership. I mean, when I say keep the people in the dealership, keeps them there rather than looking for a job.
No, I agree. When you get those stats, right, with onboarding and things of that nature, right? And I've seen that one. That one is definitely top of class for sure. Is if I gave you all the stats and what the person's doing, the gross, the volume, well, guess what? Now I know. I'm not guessing. I'm not like kind of maybe possibly. No, I'm like, okay, so here's a trend. And like, oh, you really struggle here. I now know where to coach, develop, really get into, okay, where are you struggling? And it could be, and here's where I think is the really interesting point on that particular setup is, are they struggling or does our process have a problem? Because are multiple people struggling in the same spot, which means your process is issues, not maybe the individual. But that means we have to take a really hard look at, and it's one of the videos in one of my series don't get hung up on what you think you know, right? Like we have this construct of like, nope, this is the right way. And this is the only way it can be done. And I tell people all the time, if they say, Darrell, actually, I do it this way and it works better. I'm like, I'm not going to just subscribe to it, but I'm certainly asking questions. What do you do going down the funnel? And the reason why is if it does, well, I'm taking it, right? Taking the whole thing and we're putting it into play. If piece of it do, and the other pieces maybe have flaws, okay, take one piece of it, take two pieces. It doesn't matter. Is you can't say that you're the resident and everything else is perfect and that this is the only way to do it. Because for instance, an Ed Roberts, a Glenn Lundy, a Joel Bassam, you see these unicorns because that's what they are. They are a unicorn because they're not standard. And you see them doing it, you're like, okay, well then they disprove every time what you think you know is what it is, right? It just isn't. So I think that's really interesting. And I know, and I would never want to leave this podcast without obviously you telling people, obviously another thing that you do, because I personally think that this is a technology that is quietly getting some steam, as I've seen, and I'm a big fan of it. I've talked to 3 other dealers about it. Is the way that whatever you want to call it, the window sticker or the information displayed. And the reason I like that is when we talk about the customer service model in the salesperson's experience, right? Because I think experience starts with your staff, then moves to the customer. And not saying you can't do it a different way, but if your staff hates their job or it's very difficult, I've yet to see somebody or a team of people deliver this great experience to your customers when they hate their job. But you have this new technology that allows the window sticker, the information, everything else, to where not only is it real-time updated, but it makes it to where the salesperson doesn't have to be a walking encyclopedia because it gives them the ability to actually engage with the customer at the car. And I would love for you just to talk a little bit about that because, again, what are we doing to challenge status quo? But more importantly, what are we doing to actually make the salesperson, buyer, manager, whatever it is, what are we doing to actually empower them to make it a little bit easier or more effective, if you don't like the word easy, so that they don't have to sit there and know everything?
So it's absolutely, thank you for allowing me to speak briefly on this. So Digital Communication Solutions out of Germany has been operating this platform for 6 years now. And they have it, it's mandated by Mercedes-Benz and Porsche over in Germany because of the professionalism that it gives a dealer and the subsequent teams as a merchandising tool. So it's a 12.5-inch, basically, essentially we call it a Kindle reader. And it sits in the windshield in a template that has all your why-buy here's around it, your value adds, and then you can add in a number of QR codes, either targeted or non-targeted, and that actually operates as a silent salesperson, sits in the windshield, but that tablet is actually controlled from inside the dealership. So you can change the actual screen using either your DMS, your IMS, your website, or any combination of that to get the information out there. So if you want to run a sale, you can change your entire inventory's pricing in seconds rather than 20 minutes a car by running out addendums to those cars. The other thing that it does, it actually has a GPS beacon inside of the unit. So it will actually tell you where your best spots are on the lot, where your highest test drive units are getting moved, what cars are actually dormant, so you can make sure that the batteries are alive and things like that. It gives you so much more information than the typical vinyl sticker that we put on cars. Now, having said that, as you said, the salesperson now can use their smartphone and walk directly to a car, the exact car that the customer is looking at, rather than search the lot with their hand over their head, pressing the button to see which car lights up as they go along. It just makes the professionalism so much higher. And you're talking at scale, you're $5 a month for each unit. It's nothing. Then you add in the actual fixed ops program, which is a screen about the size of an iPhone, and that allows what we deem the pizza tracking to take place, where we can actually interact with the technician and the service rider without leaving the bay, telling you exactly what stage that the RO is at, and improve the customer experience, because we can answer questions at all times, whether it's in the variable side or in the fixed side. We actually have the instantaneous information at all times. We know where everything is. We can track it on the test drive. We can track it on the road test. We can track everything that we're looking for data for the dealership. And it's insane that dealerships are looking still to operate in the methods that they're currently offering, because that is all it's doing is absorbing labor time. And that labor time is your expense. And people just get to the point where they're like, oh man, I wish I knew that car was sold. Well, you don't know it. With our system, it immediately tags it as sold. So if you're walking out to the lot, you see all your sold cars. If you walk out to the lot, you know which cars are CPO'd, which cars are not, which cars are under 15,000 at a cursory glance. It is an incredible system, and that's why we look at it's going to be so innovative when it actually breaks the mold into the United States. We have over 1,000 units in operation in the States right now, so it's just going to expand.
Well, guys, I wanted him to talk about that because I'm going to give you a recap of what I know about it and what I just heard him say. And when I make this parallel to you, it's going to be really interesting, because I was talking to one of the people that I consult with, telling them, guys, I'm telling you, this is super interesting. And not just interesting is, if any of you guys don't remember, we had these weird things called, what are they? Oh, websites. That's right, websites. And we got these things, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we should treat these things because they have a www on them, which means you're open 24 hours a day and you're open worldwide. And so then the dealer.coms, e-processes, Dealer Engage, all these website companies came out for not just automotive, but for all businesses. And what I think is interesting about this technology Peter's talking about with these, I call them the iPad Max displays, because that's about what they look like, and they are slick, is notice what he said, you guys. He has a technology that treats your lot like a website. The same things that you measure on a website. So a heat map, where are they clicking? You know where you're getting your stuff. What are they engaging with? What is driving? Your VDPs, so to say, right? He also has an interesting thing where your salespeople can click on it and get other stuff. You can change your pricing. You don't have to change stickers. Wait a minute. So now he has a technology that reduces our costs and redundancy. This is amazing. And then when you look at it, there is a service integration tool. I get it. That one's a little bit more outside the box, because your service department would actually have to be dialed in. But again, crawl, walk, run. But when we look at embracing technology and a technology that helps us, that doesn't complicate it. What we've done is he has created a technology that reduces cost, because window stickers, whether you're paying 50 cents, $1, whatever it is, I can't tell you how many times you're like putting those things in. They're reusable, which means now I don't have to have stickers. I can take it out of one, reprogram it into the next when the car sells. The salesperson, what I also heard is you can put your why buy message on there. Now, I know I'm kind of one of those guys that pushes very specific points, because not only are they important, I can prove when you don't do these how you're feeling. Your why buy message. If I call any of your stores right now, and I'm not talking about the unicorns, if you did it right, okay, keep doing what you're doing, but everybody else, I call your store and I call 10 times, I'm going to get 10 different versions of a why buy message. If he's got it on a sticker or on the display, they walk up to it. Man, I don't need people recreating the wheel. All I need to do is read what it says, right? Or have bullet points of hitting these 3 bullet points. So now we're cueing our salespeople. So where they may have been lack of confidence or unconfident, they now have the confidence of just going up and identifying. I think this is one of those things where not only does it become much more effective, we've now started to look at our lot in a different way. Isn't it an extension of our website? Haven't we been talking for 20 years how when they shop online, it should look the same way in store? Why aren't we treating it the same way? Why isn't our lot as valuable and as methodical about where we're at? If you're on a turn, right, and it does this, wouldn't you think that turn spot might be more valuable than over here on the corner, right? So when you have this technology, you can kind of see what you need to do. The car hasn't moved. We might need to move it over to our heat map, over to our hot spot. So I think this technology is fantastic. When you guys see this, obviously, Lion Partnership, go find Peter Smith. This stuff, I will tell you right now, it's the auto industry, so maybe it takes 6 months to a year for guys to figure it out. But when people start grabbing this, you're going to see that, wow, it just makes your job so much easier. But I want to obviously wrap things up and thank you, Peter, for coming on and saying, listen, guys, what we do on Street Smarts is do 2 things, right? We have open, okay, very candid conversations. We do not sit there and beg or bend to the talking heads and the talking points. We're going to get people in the streets. Peter talks to people every single day. He sees tons of stores every single year. And it's, what are we actually seeing? Not what we want you to hear, but what's actually happening. Okay. And I think Peter gave us some really dynamic insights of where we can start, how we need to start, and stop being afraid. And I will leave you guys with this. Fear is a choice, and so is winning. Choose right and decide how you want to live. Guys, this is another episode of Street Smarts, where we obviously took it to the streets with Darrell, Steed, and Peter Smith. Thank you guys so much for joining. And Peter, stay with me for just 1 second.
Thank you, guys.